Mm-mm.
Okay, Maria's recording it. Thanks, Maria. My computer is like
Okay,
yelling at
sounds
me
good.
because I have no face.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Cool, cool. So, having technical difficulties. So, today I'm just going to go into a few programs for making graphs for research projects. And I thought I'd also just go into the importance of these graphs, quality-wise, as well as specific guidelines, whether they be for student research projects or for future research publications down the line. Like I said, I'm personally relatively new to research within psychology. So anytime throughout, just feel free to jump in, share anything that you've learned or programs that you prefer, because I'm not an expert. But even when looking into this, I feel like it can be kind of daunting because there isn't really one exact right program to use, and everyone I've worked with has had their own preference, and each program basically, like no matter what it is, I've found that it has done a good job of like allowing for editing capabilities so that the graphs do look publish ready and look presentable to be in your papers. But I guess I'll just start with the importance of these graphs to begin with, because they are an extremely important part of your final research papers, mainly because it is the main visual element to your paper. So the reader is going to spend a lot of time looking at them, looking at your results and trying to understand like what all of your research is about. So it's important that time is taken to really communicate your results in the clearest way possible. And it's common that some students, myself included as a student, leaves the figures till the very end of the paper. And I feel like this sometimes can be a mistake because it's the last thing that I do, but it's might be the first thing that the reader will actually notice in the paper. So their initial judgment of your figures can even potentially influence how they interpret the quality of your research as a whole. And for publications, readers often assess these figures and images as a preview before actually reading through the paper. So it could be a make or break in making a strong first impression. So the first option we have, of course, is Excel, which we all know and love, I'm sure. And it is good for general accessibility and familiarity if you need to create something quite simple. However, it is important to be careful about the automatic recommended charts that it kind of just spits out with your data. You'll definitely have to take the time to edit these, remove any clutter, and what else? Remove any clutter that comes along with it. But once you do know which kind of figure you need to communicate your results, it does offer you pretty much anything you need, like whether it be bar graphs, scatter plot, line graphs, box and whiskers, you name it. So just to give a quick example of how Excel does produce graphs from data, I've just taken a quick sample data set of 20 participants, their caffeine consumption, and their reaction times within a task. So if you do decide, for example, from this data to select a scatter plot, this is how Excel will automatically spit it out. So you can see it's missing a few things like axis titles and it needs a few changes. So once you kind of just go into the chart elements, you can kind of add in whatever it needs, change the title, edit the increments. Just by removing like unnecessary grid lines, you can get closer to something that's a bit more clear and ready to actually add into your paper. So that's just a quick overview. I know we use Excel for almost everything, so it's good to just keep in mind. If you are looking for something beyond Excel, There is also SPSS, which is what I used for my research project. I had a school license for this. I'm not sure how many of you guys have used this, but it's also great for conducting analyses and getting a better understanding of your data. It's great for larger data sets and allows for running analyses without having to know how to code. And I think Sheris will be covering SPSS in our next meeting more in depth. So this will only kind of cover the basics and how it looks with its graphing capability. But what's good about it is that it is easy to import your data directly from Excel into SPSS. And so this is what it will look like once you import your data. This is the same data set that I was using in Excel. And this is what it'll look like in SPSS. So it looks quite similar to the Excel sheet. In addition, on the right-hand side, you have an output file that it also comes along with. And it kind of just shows you the code for everything that you do within SPSS, which is great for keeping track of your analyses. And this is where your graphs will show up too, instead of on the actual spreadsheet. So once you have your data imported, you kind of similarly can just use a chart builder feature. And this is what it'll look like under graphs. And it allows you to choose which graph type you want at the bottom, and then all of your variables will be on the left-hand side. So from here, you just click and drag any variable you want into each axis. So here, I just dragged in the reaction time on the y-axis and the caffeine consumption on the x-axis. And then the preview doesn't actually match what it's going to look like, but you just go ahead and move forward here. And this is what SPSS will automatically spit out for you in your output file. But you can see that it also does need editing for clarity and clutter and removing like this ridiculous amount of decimal points on the y-axis on the y-axis. So you can go ahead and edit, like similarly, you're just going to double click on your graph and you can change your title, change font, increments, remove grid lines and everything. So this is kind of just a before and after of just a few changes I made to it briefly to just make it more clear. Just removing the grid lines, getting rid of the decimal points, changing the title, and then you can do any steps you need to make it look more clear before you want to actually put it in your paper. So these are really the only two that I've used, but there are some other programs that I know of and I've heard that are also quite helpful for creating graphs. So for example, GraphPad Prism is one that I've heard is really good for analyzing and graphing as well. And this would also be with no coding. It's pretty highly rated for being easy to use, but it does require a yearly plan. I'm not sure if these offer licenses similar to SPSS. But I just looked into their student plans where you can find, if you are looking for something more than Excel or SPSS. R has also been known to be good for graphics for research papers as well. I personally haven't used R. I would like to learn. It was on my list for quarantine, but it's just at the bottom of the list. But this will require the coding knowledge of R, but many do like it and recommend it if they are already using it for their research projects and they already know how to code with R. And then Origin Lab is another one that I found that many recommend, similar to GraphPad Prism, I think, for being able to graph and analyze data without having to code anything. And this one also does require a yearly plan. But essentially, once you have found a software that works for you and you are ready to create your graphs, just kind of going into what's important to consider in terms of guidelines from either your professors or supervisors, um, or for like any scientific journals. If you're looking to publish, each one does have their own guidelines. So I'm just quickly going to go into the APA guidelines for graphs as well, just so that you can have a quick visual of it. And kind of just refer back to this when you are making your own graphs, if you just forget anything or if there's anything missing. This is essentially from APA on like everything you need, if it's necessary, of course, for your graph. But essentially all types of visual displays other than your tables are going to be considered figures. So these commonly are going to be your graphs, whether they be the bar charts, scatter plots, etc. You just always want to make sure that you have your figure number, your title, your image, which of course is going to be either the graph or any other illustration, a legend if necessary, and your note at the bottom, just clear and concise, explaining anything it needs to explain. But essentially, just some other points to consider when you are making graphs for your papers are just to try to evaluate the necessity of every aspect of your figures and eliminate any unnecessary clutter. Just because this is going to be a main focal point of the paper. Just to keep in mind that many journals do have their own guidelines about figures. Usually you will find preferences for file types and resolution. And sometimes journals also have specifics about color, space, and figure width. But if a journal doesn't really specify, I would just say try to use APA guidelines. And then in addition, it's important to note to be mindful with color as well and not to make figures too distracting. Really only use colors when necessary is what I tend to go by. And make sure to choose colors with greater contrast so that the figures are clear. And always have your clear message in mind throughout the process of creating your graph, just to ensure that the main message that you're trying to get across to your reader can be clearly communicated, and it's something that you can kind of just relate back to every time or every step of the process you're in when you are making your graph. Because I know sometimes I'm making a graph and I get so caught up in the details that I forget like what my graph is even trying to show and what I'm trying to present to that reader. But I guess last are just some APA checklist points that are good to keep in mind as well, just for reference during the process of creating these visuals too. And everything within APA is mostly just regarding checking that your figures are necessary, they're good to go, making sure that it's clean, following proper guidelines, making sure they're referenced in your text properly and they're numbered in the right order within your paper. It's something I had to triple check in my paper too, because once it adds up, your figures can get out of order and you just want to make sure everything is all in the right order. But I just wanted to include this in the end if it's ever something you want to reference while you are working on your papers. But that is everything that I have. But feel free to add in like what you like to use, what you guys use at UCLA, just because I'm not too familiar, but would love to hear. And if you guys have any questions too.
Yay! Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
How do you know whether like your graph has like extraneous detail or not? Because like you said that generally you want to make things easy to read. You want to make them so that like the information is accessible, but like is there like are there like guidelines to know like what to include and what not to?
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say like something that I do is I go through the APA website like crazy first, and then I look at a lot of examples within papers that I've saved and I've really liked. And I look for charts that are very like kind of similar to what I'm working on, just to see how they managed like the size, color, um, and kind of just keeping. I would say I just keep those kind of in their separate folder just to reference anytime if I see a visual that's like really striking to me or a graph that I think is presented really well. But I guess another thing is just to go through each thing in your graph once you have all of your information on it and just try out a few different things, like delete anything that you think isn't absolutely necessary, and then see if you think it is clearer and gets your point across. I don't know if that's helpful.
Gotcha. Kind of like a minimalist approach to, and then looking at what other people have done to communicate their data.
Yeah, it's definitely good to save things that stand out to you and keep everything that's absolutely necessary, but I think less is more because you don't want them to get too distracted too.
I just want to add to that. I agree with all those points, and I am not like, I don't think any of us are like new to graphing per se, but I am definitely new to graphing in like manuscripts and like how important they are. So what I wanted to add was that having outside people read your manuscript is often helpful because like you as like the writer of your paper and the person who has run the analysis and the person who's like extremely familiar with your data and what you found, it's so easy for you to understand your graphs. Sometimes even if you're communicating the idea that you want to get across, sometimes other people when they come in and look at your graphs are like, I don't know what the heck you're trying to say because there's just too much going on. So I think that's also a reason why a lot of people have like other people read their manuscripts. It's not only because like they need their expertise on that point of view, but also because having an outside opinion on those kinds of things can just tell you whether or not you're accidentally making things too complicated that are more understandable to you because you understand your data very well, if that makes sense. Kind of like fresh perspectives from other people. So, yeah. What kind of graphs do you, or what have you guys used? Like what other programs do people use to graph?
I use R, but I will tell you that that is an adventure. It honestly, I don't know. I personally didn't mind the trial and error. And it was just like so complicated to do a really simple graph. But like I love the color scheme options. There's literally like infinite possibilities. And like one time I made like a heat plot just for fun. It had absolutely nothing to do with the project, but I was like, let's see how it would look like this. And it's just so cool, like all the opportunities you could do. And like you can, there's also an option to like put them together. So if you're doing multiple, if you're doing multiple graphs, there's a way to like stitch them together so that they're all part of like a bigger plot. And I don't know, it's, I like the endless possibilities. And like once you find the resources, like once you find a good resource that gives you like some tips on how to make the graphs, it's like way more straightforward. Because then you can just kind of like copy and paste the framework and then just like replace in like your data and your colors. So
Yeah, I totally agree. Have you ever imported like color schemes? Because they have like infinite color schemes. I think we talked about this in a RA meeting once that you can get like people have made them from like movies and stuff, like different color schemes. So you can like import that and make your graph like a movie colored theme. Anyway, off topic. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I've never used R for graphing before. Till we did the pup project, which to be honest, like I couldn't successfully do anything because every single time I tried to do it, I was like, this is not working. But we made a bubble chart for one of our things, and I don't know, it's cool to me that with R you can do anything with R. Literally you can do anything. Like you can make colors, sizes, shapes, like keys, like anything help tell the story of your data because it's so like it's not bound by what a program has. It is programming. So you can just tell it what you want it to do and it will literally do anything. So I think that that's cool about it. It's very flexible.
How long would you guys say it takes to master R enough to be able to make graphs with like your own data? Because I want to try, but I know nothing about it.
I personally don't think it takes that long. I think if you know the basics of R, which you could learn from honestly like the workshops at UCLA, you can understand how to like run it and like what the interface looks like that kind of thing, then you would know how to at least copy and paste a code from like what Maria said, like an online website that already has the framework written out for you, which to be honest, like half of coding it's like a Googling and figuring out
Yeah.
what like Stack Overflow says and then like copying it into your code. I think like you could honestly learn that in a month. Like I don't think it's that hard, but I'm not a master and I still couldn't get the graphs to work for Pub on R. So like I think when you get to more complex things, like it could take a lot longer than that. And I think to be like a master coder, it takes years. Like it's a long, slow journey, I feel like. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily takes that long to get one simple graph in R. But I don't know, Maria, what your experience is.
Honestly, my approach is I learn something for a project and then I don't use that particular skill in R anymore. So then I forget about it. So then the next time I have to do the same thing, I have to Google it all over again. Probably not the best approach, but honestly, yeah, that's just kind of part of, especially with R, it's just kind of like, just Google's your best friend. And like being a good coder doesn't mean that you like know everything by memory. It means it more so to me and to a lot of people that I've talked to, it just means knowing how to Google properly, like knowing your way around what resources to use in using R. But I would recommend Swirl. I used it for a little while, but then I ended up, it was too slow for me, so I ended up not using it. But Swirl's a really good resource. So it gives you like, it comes with the practice data sets and it gives you like tutorials how to do like the very basic things. And there's a lot of positive reinforcement. So like whenever you get something right, it's like, great job, or like you're doing amazing. And then if you don't do it right, then it still gives you like hints on how to do it. I thought it was great. It's like, not your typical like feeling, because with R, sometimes you can feel like, like I'm just literally trying to add numbers to this graph. Why is it taking 3 hours? But then you figure it out and it's okay. So I like Swirl.
Maria, you should give a tutorial on Swirl, maybe next quarter or something. Like how
We'll
to
see.
download it and how to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I was gonna say something, but I actually forgot. Oh yeah. How many of you guys have used R before or know R semi?
For Psych 100A, pretty sure every Psych major took it, but yeah, I use R in that class. And then for Psych 100B, we use SPSS. But it's only like very like minimal stuff. Like I don't know anything else about it.
Grant, I saw that you also.
Yeah, I did those too, and then I also took one of the workshops this spring quarter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I
go
like
ahead
Yeah, it was really
and
good.